Today I'm going to talk about how to get the best use out of ChatGPT. I'm someone who is a pretty heavy ChatGPT user. I use it many times every day. I've done very rigorous experimentation. I'm the type of person who will open a couple dozen ChatGPT tabs and try the same prompt with subtly different wording in each one to see how the results vary. So uh, I've been doing a lot of work to understand how to get the most out of this tool, especially since so many people today um, don't seem to know how to use it properly. And a lot of people um, believe that you can't trust it because some of it is true that it does hallucinate sometimes. So you have to be careful. And for really important things, you do want to double check it. But a lot of it also comes down to proper usage and what's called prompt engineering. So there's kind of a specific science evolving here around how to write the ideal type of prompt to get the best result. So if you are an ENTP like I am, or an INTP, or an INTJ, INFJ, another personality type that really appreciates um, accuracy, truth, really understanding how to use tools the best possible way, then this video is for you. I'm going to give you my top 5 tips that I have uncovered over my latest round of experimentation on how to best use ChatGPT. Actually, it's 4 tips. Okay. So, number 1, if you don't already know this, is to fill out the custom instructions. So, to get here, on the mobile app, you go to the little circle icon of your initials, like mine says MC, and then you hit personalization and then customize. And on the web interface, I think you just hit your kind of circle on the top right, and then hit customize ChatGPT. And in there, you can give it a set of instructions that it will automatically apply to all prompts. So you don't have to keep telling it the same thing again and again. So, for example, you could tell it, I'm this job who lives in this city. I have these siblings. Um, you know, and then, so you can tell it about yourself, and then you can also give it specific instructions. So you could say, for example, I have a certain level of expertise in the Enneagram. So please speak to me as an expert on that subject. And please stop telling me every time what the Enneagram is whenever I ask a question about it. Right? So you can write a pretty substantially long set of instructions there. And I'll share a link to mine that I've carefully crafted that you might find valuable. Tip number 2, tell ChatGPT who you want it to be. So there's a significant difference I've seen in my tests between asking it a question versus saying, please act as an expert someone, and then asking the question. So, for example, in my latest round of tests, I wanted to ask about a subject that might be controversial and might have, many different opinions out there on the internet. So I asked a lot of specific questions about autism. And there's a pretty big difference between asking something like, my kid has been diagnosed with autism, how can I best help them? Versus saying, please act as a psychotherapist. My kid was diagnosed with autism, how can I best help them? Versus the best one that I tried is even more specific, saying, please act as an expert psychotherapist who specializes in autism. My kid was diagnosed with autism, how do I best support them? So you are telling it how you want it, the framing from which you want it to answer, or the worldview from which you want it to answer. And basically, any subject that you're asking about, right? Like if you're asking a question about quantum physics, you'll probably get a better result if you start with, please act as an expert quantum physicist. Then the next, point number 3, is to basically tell it how you want it to answer, and to be very specific and careful about how you phrase your question. So I saw in my tests that it's reading all sorts of articles on the internet in its training data, right? It's reading kind of mainstream ones, things written for scientific communities, and so depending on how you ask your question, the phrasing that you use, it seems to kind of pull more from more kind of layperson sources or scientific sources or whatever, right? So, for example, there will be a big difference in the answer if you say something like, "My kid has autism. What should I do?" versus saying, my kid was recently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. What are the top research backed interventions to best support their quality of life? Right? So the former will give you much more generic tips, and the latter will give you much more nuanced answers. Um, in terms of telling it exactly what you mean and exactly what you want, I did an interesting test yesterday with my voting ballot. So I tried taking a picture of my ballot that has, all these different fields to vote on for different positions and measures and so on. And I basically told it, here are my political views. Here are some examples of politicians that I like. Please tell me how I should vote for every single one of these things. And, it did great. It gave me specific choices for all of those items. But then when I actually started to research on my own to compare, I found that many of its responses were pretty good. But what I realized was, particularly in the measures, when it's not just vote for someone, but where it gives kind of a little summary, like here's what a yes vote would mean on this, and here's what a no vote would mean on this. And it has a few lines kind of explaining what each of those mean. And my guess is that what ChatGPT did was simply read those and give me a yes or no answer based on what it read in there and what I told it about my political views. And so it was only doing kind of a simplistic analysis. But when I then modified the prompt to say, please don't just base your answers on what is written on the ballot. Please actually research these. Go out there on the internet and, find reputable sources in my political leanings, and especially don't just pay attention to what the politicians themselves say or what the proponents of this measure say, but please actually look at their voting records, or please actually look at what sources that I trust, and I listed a few example websites. Look at what they actually say about these measures and these politicians. And when I asked it that way, you could see it actually paused a lot longer, and it said searching the web. And this time when it answered, it gave me, I'd say about half of the answers were different, and it actually gave me some sources too. So that was much more trustworthy. And then another modification that I made was I noticed one of the politicians that I recognized, it kind of gave me a different recommendation that I would expect. And when I asked why you recommended that person, it talked about kind of their voting record from several years ago, and it said, "Oh, but I also recognize that how they've behaved in this recent election cycle is a bit different." So, okay, great. That's another clue for me that I can refine the prompt even further and say, please put a lot more weight on what this person has recently been saying in 2024 compared to their past self. And then I also, after looking at its recommendations even more, that it was often recommending people from, less popular political parties. I told it, please only recommend people that actually have a realistic chance of winning. Right. So again, the more you customize the prompt and tell it, try to kind of make your thinking clear. Like you might intuitively know, please don't recommend this person that seems really cool, but there's zero chance they're going to win, right? Like that might feel obvious to you, but you actually need to tell ChatGPT that, right? Because if you just say, please recommend the most conservative or most progressive or whatever your leanings are person, it's going to do that regardless of if they're from a tiny political party or one of the major ones or whatever else, right? So I think that's a good example of really making your thinking clear. And you can actually write a pretty long prompt with many stipulations, especially if it's for something as important as voting, right? Or, how you're going to care for your child who was diagnosed with autism, right? These are pretty important things. Then the fourth tip is about the strength of the different models. So if you're not aware, I think up at the top right now in October 2024, the default model is ChatGPT 4.0. And so if you tap that, you'll see some other choices. There's also O1 Preview and O1 Mini. And so 4.0 is kind of, I think it's the best one that's still available in the free version. But then O1 is the newer model that is specifically designed to be better at analytical reasoning and statistics and things. That might only be for paid users. I'm not sure right now. But the O1 Preview, because it's designed to be better at analysis, is designed to take longer when it answers. It actually pauses and thinks about it for a while. So it can take 10 to 15 seconds for it to answer. So when I was doing these exhaustive tests on voting and autism, I didn't want to wait 15 seconds for every little test. So I used the O1 Mini model, which is very similar to O1 Preview, but they've kind of scaled it down a bit to make it a smaller size so it answers more quickly, maybe in like 2 or 3 seconds. So I was using the O1 Mini for most of my tests, and I thought, it's probably pretty good. It's probably not too much different from O1 Preview. But it turned out that when I was asking in particular some questions that were more nuanced about like what are the best organizations that I should trust for advice on autism, just from my own knowledge, I know there are some that are not very well respected in the autism community. And the O1 Mini still recommended those, whereas the O1 Preview, it mentioned one organization in particular and then added a caveat underneath that said, please be aware you might want to do your own research here because people in the autism community don't like this one, and it kind of has a bad reputation. So it turns out that the O1 Preview model, does offer something additional over the O1 Mini. So the Mini is probably fine for most tasks, but if you're doing something that really requires precision, accuracy, or there's a lot of controversy or a lot of different polarizing opinions out there on the internet, it's probably worth using the O1 Preview. And again, really being clear about your wording in the prompt. Hey, I'm popping back in again just to offer two more pieces that I think are important to name here. One is my conclusion after my voting experiment. I spent a while adjusting the prompts and trying to improve it enough to give me solid feeling answers on where to place all my votes on the ballot. And ultimately, I checked that against different Reddit threads and local publications that suggest which measures to vote for or vote against and so on. And based on that additional qualitative research, I ended up changing about a third, I'd say, of ChatGPT's answers. So I guess I want to add the disclaimer here that even though I kind of talked about using ChatGPT to help you with voting, my conclusion after a good amount of prompt engineering is that it's pretty good, it's pretty close, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I think we're probably still, who knows, maybe 6 to 12 months away from the point where I would really trust it to say, I'm going to take a picture of my ballot. Here are my political views. I want you to solidly research each thing and tell me what to vote for every single thing. I do think absolutely we're getting to the point where I will trust it with that fully, more than any Reddit threads or anything else. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Um, so I encourage you to do your own research as well. You can use chat as a helper, but don't let it make all your decisions for you. And similarly, that brings me to my second caveat or disclaimer, which is, I use the example of please act as an expert psychotherapist, right? And I know the disclaimer I'm probably supposed to offer here is don't use chat for psychotherapy, right? But what I would say is that I don't think that's entirely fair either. I think that chat is actually a pretty excellent tool for a lot of things in the realm of personal growth and even the therapy realm. But, it requires a couple of things. First, it requires you to carefully write the prompt. Again, like, please act as a therapist who specializes in a certain modality or who specializes in this area that I'm interested in. Um, like for me, I'm trained in Hakomi, a psychotherapeutic modality. So sometimes I might say, please act as an expert psychotherapist trained in Hakomi and remind me, what is the ideal intervention in this specific case. And, for me, that's it can be almost like going back to check the textbook or going back to check my notes from school, right? To get kind of a quick reminder of, okay, what does Hakomi say is the ideal intervention there? But the second thing is that it really relies on do you have a bullshit detector, right? Like, is this an area where you personally know enough that you can recognize if it's likely that it might be hallucinating or getting something wrong, right? Like me, I've actually been formally trained in Hakomi, so I can use chat to offer me some reminders of things, but I can also tell if it's getting something wrong. Um, so I think especially, if you're not a therapist, if you don't have any training in this, you want to be careful, right? Like chat is just a tool. So it can be very helpful. Like if you're asking for specific tips, like, uh, I often have arguments with my partner about this kind of topic. Please help me find a better way of phrasing this kind of complaint or request. Chat might be really helpful there, right? Or, I often feel depressed. What are some of the most clinically backed interventions for depression? You know, chat's actually going to be pretty good probably. So I wouldn't say like don't use it at all, blanket statement for therapy related issues. But at the end of the day, obviously a human therapist, at least at this point in time in the current state of AI, a human therapist is still going to be superior in many ways. And of course, it's going to offer you that human connection, the empathy, so much that chat can't offer. So I think chat is again a great tool. It's useful for offering kind of quick tips and things. But be careful about relying on it too much, especially in an area that you're less familiar with. All right. So the 4 tips again are use the custom instructions. I'll give you a link in the video description to mine. Number 2 is tell it specifically who you want it to be. Please act as an expert on particle physics, right? And even telling it kind of who the audience is. Like, please act as an expert on particle physics who is talking to another expert on physics, versus please act as an expert on particle physics who is talking to a kindergarten classroom and trying to explain physics to them at their level, right? You can tell it who the audience is, how you want it to speak to you, at what level. Number 3 is, again, tell it exactly what you want. So, don't just in my example, it's not just please look at this ballot and tell me what you think. It's please actually research these candidates, right? And use these kinds of sources in your analysis. And then number 4 is pick the right model for the job. So, 4.0 is pretty good. O1 Mini is definitely better and faster. And then O1 Preview is slower, but noticeably better as well. All right. Hope that helps. And best of luck in your ChatGPT endeavors. I'd love to hear how these tips work for you in the comments. And hope you have a nourishing day.